OCD family community. Happy June, happy Pride, and a big congrats to our fam with graduates celebrating accomplishments and starting new chapters. I love seeing you here at the water cooler, our favorite space to hydrate and quench during the summertime. And today, we're going to be talking about Pure O. What is it? Is it really a thing? And what can be done to help? But before we dive into this conversation, remember that this isn't therapy. So reach out to your treatment provider or seek consultations if you wonder if this may apply to you or your loved one. Okay, so Puro, for new fam, any guesses on what this means? It's not pure 100% orange juice, although that's the good stuff right there, just saying. But when it comes to OCD, Pure O is in reference to pure obsessions or presentations of OCD classified as purely obsessional. So for review, obsessive compulsive disorder has two main ingredients. Has these sticky, repeated, unwanted obsessions, and compulsions, which are physical or mental acts that aim to minimize, neutralize, or avoid the distress brought about by obsessions. So, can you have OCD without the C, compulsions? Well, according to the 1994 Journal of Clinical Psychiatry's publication by Dr. Stephen Phillipson, yes, and thus a construct for Pure O was born. Fast forward 30 years, and there have been engaging debates over whether a person can truly have OCD without the compulsions. Dr. Phillipson originally created this term after noticing that a lot of his patients had non-observable rituals. Now, let's pause there for a moment because the wording is important. If you were to jump back to our definition of a compulsion, the physical or mental acts bit, let's zoom out just a bit more and define acts. According to the Oxford Dictionary, an act in verb form is defined as, quote, to take action, to do something, or to behave in the way specified, end quote. Going just a touch further, because I'm extra. As a noun, Oxford defines acts then as, quote, a thing done, a deed, or a pretense, end quote. So suffice to say, if we're doing something, taking action, behaving, or constructing something, even if it's a story for pretense, then we're acting in one way or another, and many folks then will sort that into the behavioral category. So if compulsions are behavioral responses, then the absence of behavioral responses creates the absence of compulsions, right? To a pure Oist suffering from debilitating OCD with their experience of non-observable rituals? Yes, absolutely. So why then do people take issue with this? Well, many experts and researchers will contend that's because OCD has to have that C, compulsions. I mean, it's in the name. And just because a person's mental act or reasoning may not be observable to you or to me, it's still wreaking quite a bit of havoc for the OCD sufferer. Personal story time, because hey, it's water cooler culture for you. When I started wondering if I might have OCD before I quote unquote solved that for myself and dismissed it, how lovely for me. And mind you, this was a long time before I became an OCD provider. I thought I might have Puro. It was what I referred to fondly as my gateway subtype. And how I came to this conclusion was after having a repeated, very unwanted thought, and I turned to my trusty friend Google to help me understand why my brain was braining in this way, which led me to an article on Pure O. And man, if that description didn't peer right into my soul. I further took my newfound learning and dared verbalizing it to my therapist, as scary as that felt, because what if I neglected understanding this correctly? And she judged me accordingly. But being a therapist myself, I had a strong conviction to practice what I preach, so I disclosed it anyway. And she reassured me that it sounded like an intrusive thought. And at that time, that was enough for my brain to dismiss it. And because it went away so successfully, I wondered, did I have OCD at all? Maybe I was wrong. Either way, it didn't stick, and my awful appraisals of what that meant about me disappeared. So Pure O or not, onward and upward. But if we were to provide past me with some constructive feedback, it might look like this. Number 1, I had repeated unwanted thoughts. It was upsetting. Why would I think this? What does that mean about me? Whether we call it a solving compulsion or compulsive reasoning, I was in the thick of it, and it felt important to figure out. This led me to number 2, counting how many times this really yucky thought was popping up for me and scanning for any possible triggers, meaning consequences. Though not observable to anyone else, I was keeping careful track, which led me to number 3, Googling. And Google doesn't live rent-free in my head, y'all. But also, this is an externalized behavior. So I had to open a computer or a browser on my phone and Google. Actually, I specifically remember sitting in my gym parking lot, Googling on my phone for this particular sequence. Number 4, I read the Pure O description and I felt reassured. Oh man, how great! Well, for that moment at least. Because even with this extremely edifying information that really spoke to the core of me, never mind the fact that I am reading it fresh from my externalized researching compulsion, the intrusive thoughts and feelings still returned. Which, number 5, led me to engage in a robust debate of pros and cons, evaluating the benefit versus the potential consequences of disclosing this to my own therapist. I didn't write it down, but I took mental note. And I created all the mental checklists a woman could dream of. Number 6, add a pinch of shame and a threat of imposter syndrome since I encourage my clients to share with me, but I'm potentially not willing to share my own fears with my therapist. And that ushered me right into 7, going in and seeking professional reassurance for myself. Only this time, it didn't function as reassurance, which, love that for me. And how do I know? Because my brain took the information and that was it. My brain accepted it. And while the intrusive thought tried poking holes in my information a few times, I accepted that it's just an intrusive thought, and intrusive thoughts are just thoughts. I didn't have to prove anything to it, and sure enough, that particular intrusive thought drifted away. Which led me to number 8. Ah, yes, I'm cured. Or am I? Did I ever even have this at all? You see, it was easy to identify the original thought as intrusive or unwanted. And thusly, for my brain, I allowed myself to dismiss it. But in the nuancing, I continued to wonder if I was ever actually even dealing with this problem called OCD. Maybe I got that wrong. And y'all, therapist, I can't get that wrong. I should know these things. But as many lived experience warriors or family members listening can likely vouch, I was still compulsing by trying to solve this question. And for what it's worth, OCD could teach a masterclass in shape-shifting. So was it really gone? Or was the content of my obsession just different now? I'll let you jump to your own conclusions. But here we can count no fewer than 8 different mental and physical acts that I engaged in, some of which were actually pretty observable after all. So did I have Pure O? Or do you or someone you love? Well, before we put a bow on this, let me just acknowledge, if you or someone you know thinks they may be struggling with Pure O, then I think the more important question is, do they have OCD? Because if the answer to that is yes, then it's important to know that there are evidence-based treatments and hope available. I think what becomes problematic about the discussion around Pure O is sometimes we miss the forest through the trees. Whether you or I agree if Pure O is a form in and of itself of OCD or existent or non-existent, it's pretty likely that the person behind that potential label is suffering and desperate for help. And call me crazy, but I think this debate ultimately can be boiled down to a game of semantics at the end of the day. So if a person is suffering, vouching they have Pure O or any other subtype of OCD for that matter, let's help them access evidence-based care. Because the problem, ultimately, isn't whether the rituals are observable or not, internal or external, action or inaction. The problem is OCD. And in that case, there's a lot of hope, fam. And with that, I've got to get going. My little family is heading out on vacay this week, and there's still plenty to do. But I look forward to bumping into you all summer long here at the water cooler.